Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. This one into the Libra new moon of the 25th or 26th of September, depending on where you're located. First of all, I'm going to share how I'm going to structure the video. I'll share on the screen exactly when this event is occurring in all the major cities of the world. I'm then going to outline what I feel a Libran new moon represents. I'm going to then show on the screen a simple birth chart wheel with the distribution of all the planets around it, so we can understand what the collective impact will be as far as the zodiac as a whole is concerned over the next month. But please stay with me. Then I'll briefly share on the screen the technical event chart based on Universal Central Time, so we can understand what the ascendant is and also what house sign the position of the sun and the moon lie in, because that's going to give us some fascinating insights. And finally, I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can view in relation to your sun or your ascendant, or both if they're different. The choice is yours. If you would, however, like to understand what serious astrology can do for you personally, if you give me 3 pieces of birth data, of time, date and place of birth, I can give you a roadmap that can guide you for the rest of your life. And in my special package, also your year 2023 personal forecast. But if you order it in 22, you'll get the rest of year 22 free. Also, there's 30% off. And these reports can give you incredible amounts of information to guide your future moves, to understand some of the repetitive patterns that may have been in your life, and to learn to grow beyond some of the more difficult ones, but also to really understand your potential in a much greater way. Please see the link below for more. And if you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love it if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you've already subscribed or are a regular follower, thank you so much for all your support and views. So the Libra new moon. So on the screen now you can see where it occurs in all the major cities of the world. Now, a Libran new moon is an opportunity for us to all think about relationship matters. This is a cardinal sign, so it's very much to do with leadership. It's also very much to do with balance. It's ruled by the beguiling energies of Venus, and that planet also governs the sign of Taurus. But that's much more concerned with money, self-worth, and more sensual enjoyment. The sign of Libra is very much more to do with presentation, how we interact, graciousness, and it can also be very much linked to fashion. So if you're thinking of giving yourself some kind of glamorous makeover, this would be a fine time to think about it. But this is a new moon that comes at a time when the world is really becoming very polarized in different viewpoints. The sign of Libra is encouraging us to try to find the midpoint between what we believe and how we interact with others, and also giving them an opportunity to express their individuality. So the connection is a fair share. We get situations where we can collaborate and cooperate. This really can, if we embrace it, help to just bring us in a little bit from those very entrenched positions that we can occupy. Now also, relationships of all kinds are really emphasized by this new moon. So if you'd like to bring someone into your world over the next month, set your intentions now. If you'd like to bring more harmony to your relationship situation, this is also a great time to try to understand how you can achieve that. And I think one of the great things about relationships generally that we all need to practice all the time is listening better, and also understanding that if other people do see things differently, trying not to take it so personally, or seeing that it's because their experience is so different to ours. And just seeing that alone can take away some of the tensions that can permeate. Also, the sun's passage through the sign of Virgo is very much about precision, but that can create a brittleness and a tension. So now we have that opportunity to set our boundaries, to be assertive, but at the same time try to find those areas of collaboration. I guess you could say one of the things the Libra new moon asks us to do is celebrate the things we have in common, because there are commonalities to all people, but also become much less focused on the things that make us different. Now on the screen now, I'm sharing the simple birth chart wheel for this event. And you can see that in the sign of Aries, the first zodiac sign, is the planet Jupiter. It may be in retrograde, but it's directly opposite the sun and the moon in the sign of Libra. So it's on the 7th house cusp. And of course Jupiter rules 2 signs. Through its rulership of Sagittarius, it's very much about optimism, growth, fortune, expansion, travel, and can be to do with the law. Its rulership of the sign of Pisces is very much more to do with the spiritual domain, raising our consciousness. So in the sign of Aries, it's about initiation, but the retrograde may have slowed down some of the things that we've been trying to get off the ground of late. But being right on the 7th house cusp in this simple chart wheel shows that it's supporting the sun and the moon precisely in the way that they would like in how we relate. The descendant, the 7th house, is a very Libran and Venusian energy. So this gives us a wonderful uplift over the next month. Even more opportunity to try to find the ways to move forwards in a more collective and unified way. And doesn't the world really need that? But of course there are some challenging influences going on, not least Saturn with Uranus. That's really tightening up, and between the 2nd and 12th of October, they're within 1 minute of being exactly square. Of course, they caused a lot of aggravation in year 21 and the start of year 2022. So that's coming back into focus. So the sign of Aquarius, where Saturn is, and it's in retrograde, is the sign of the collective. The sign where Uranus is Taurus is about that money, and Uranus is all about rebelliousness. So we're seeing industrial action, we're seeing Gazprom turning off the gas, we've seen governmental intervention in the markets, and of course we've seen grabs of territory. That's also very much about Uranus doing sudden, bold, but not necessarily acceptable things in the sign of Taurus. But actual fact, the sun and the moon are very early in Libra, and Pluto is quite late in Capricorn, so we have a disassociate trine. So things are shifting, and I think it's going to become much more obvious early next year in March, on the 23rd, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, the direction of travel that we're going. It's going to go back there. It's only briefly there till June the 11th. And then on the 21st of January 2024, it's going to go into Aquarius for a much longer stay. And that's when we're really going to see some very new approaches starting to develop. But you can also see that Venus and Mercury are tightly together, and Venus is the ruler of the sign of Libra, but they're tightly together in the sign of Virgo. And of course, Venus is not at its best here, it's in its fall, but Mercury is in one of its 2 home zones, but it is in retrograde, and they are opposite Neptune. So Neptune can be a very distorting, a very swirling, misty energy, and it's in the part of the overall chart, the 12th house, very much to do with our subconscious, our fears, our anxieties, but also a more spiritual potential, and also our more healing capacity. And Venus and Mercury together, the two planets of relating, Venus not in its greatest zone and Mercury in retrograde being conflicted by Neptune, we can see that if information isn't shared clearly and concisely, then it's very easy for misunderstandings to happen. So despite this glorious new moon, we're going to have to work hard at the detail. But also, Saturn, despite that crunching and abrasive right angle to Uranus, is actually in a really fine angle to Mars. And Mars is in the third house of Gemini. That's quick wits, sharp exchanges, passionate expression of ideas, linking very well with Saturn in the 11th house of the collective. So I do feel there's going to be a lot of conversations going on. But you can also see that Mars is conflicted by Neptune too. So Neptune once more, incredibly influential. And so a lot of our fears are active in terms of a lot of our conversations. And because this Libra new moon is about relationships, we must really be aware that with Venus and Mercury locked in the 12th house of the sign of Libra, that the fearfulness of our situations, our concerns, can be quite active. Neptune, in terms of the sign of Libra, is in house 6, very much about the practical domain, but there's not much practical about Neptune, except we perhaps could use our inspiration and compassion to help people in a practical way. So Mars squaring with Neptune is also a bit of a trickster influence. So we basically have a broad T-square between Mars, Neptune, Venus and Mercury, despite that glorious alliance between the Sun and the Moon in opposition with Jupiter. So there can be real efforts to try to get greater collaborative energies going, but we need to be very focused on the detail. Quick communication that comes from Mars could actually be counterproductive. It's important to slow things down and try to understand what our subconscious is suggesting to us in terms of Venus and Mercury in the 12th house of this event, as far as Libra being the first house. Is just suggesting that we need to be conscious that we may be rather reactive. So that's in terms of the overall energies we can expect over the next month. Keeping it clear, absolutely essential. Trying to listen carefully to where people are coming from. Trying to meet people in the middle. That doesn't mean to say we have to agree with them. Learning to agree to disagree, really a very important thing to learn to do. And obviously a lot of people state opinions these days, but not necessarily have those conversations. So the more we have conversations, the more we can all mutually learn. But there can be some distortion around, which we have to work hard to try to overcome. Now on the screen now we have the event chart based on Universal Central Time, and you can see that the ascendant is in Cancer, which itself is very much to do with nurture, but it does mean that Mars is in the 12th house, stirring up those old angers and resentments and grievances. And because the combination of not just the Sun and the Moon, but also in Placidus, Venus and Mercury, all in the 4th house, I think we're all wanting to find greater peace and equilibrium around where we live, who we live with, and how, not least because of the concern we've all got about the cost of fuel, the crunch in credit that's developing in terms of increased cost. You know, it's a very difficult time with lots of financial headwinds. So I think the overall collective energy at this time is very much about being aware of security. However, also because of the 4th house energy, this also gives us a chance to think about what's really important to us. You know, if we do all turn down the thermostat somewhat, I mean, I've been in houses when it's really not been the winter, it's been maybe early in the autumn or in the spring, and you pop round to have a chat with someone about something briefly, and it's absolutely boiling in there, and people are walking around in barefoot. which, you know, that's obviously their right. But if we all become much more conscious of fuel security, that can have a lot of environmental benefits too. So I'm not talking about people who really are having to make stark choices between eating or heating. I'm talking about if you still can have your heating on, try to turn it down, spend less time in the shower, continue to be very mindful of the packaging that we're using. The fourth house, of course, is also very much to do with the environment. So this new moon suggests if we can all come together, the collective, and cooperate, because the air signs are very much about discussion, Librans very much about trying to find balance. If we just minimize our impact on our domestic world and our immediate environmental demands, then that can lessen the cost of energy for those who really are going to struggle very much to get through this. And it's not just a Western world problem. You know, what's going on in the Ukraine and with the Russians limiting supplies of gas, or Western Europe trying to become less dependent on it. There are other countries that are also, I was reading earlier about Bangladesh, has got a frightful increase in the cost of fuel. We've got a big ecological crisis in Pakistan. All these things, you know, are going on in the world. It's not just purely about, you know, the central heating for us folks in the more evolved, inverted commas, world. It's affecting everybody. So if we can all just be a bit more mindful of conservation, then there's a lot we can do to help this current situation and help each other to celebrate the things we have in common, rather than focusing on the things that make us different. And that's the essential issue with this Libran new moon. So please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, beginning with Aries. Aries, what I like about your chart is that Mars, your ruler, is in your third house, which could be giving you a lot of motivation to get busy and more physically active. But if you can actually join in some kind of sporting way with another or others, that actually would be really motivational. So if you have got a local dance group or aerobics group or a yoga group or a swimming group, that would be a lovely thing to do. If you're someone who's a bit more of a competitive ram, playing tennis or table tennis or badminton, because the seventh house can also be where we come in to a point of competition with others too. So exciting opportunities for you in that regard. But Neptune in your 12th house could just be seeing that your emotional energy is very sensitive at the moment. And as much as Venus and Mercury are asking you to be quite sacrificing to help others in your 6th house, I think essentially this is a time to think very carefully about what you're prepared to put into situations. And the more you brief yourself on what's acceptable to you, the more your boundaries can build up in a constructive way. And then when you do encounter someone you really like, you'll know much more quickly how to respond to the opportunity. But in an existing relationship, if there can be greater collaboration around the domestic side of your life, I think that's something that you would really appreciate for sure. But in general, yes, this could be a time that someone really spectacular comes into your world. Week commencing the 26th of September also sees Venus move into your opposite sign, which is very fortunate. And that's within the scope of this particular, pardon my pun, this particular month forecast. And that's also going to be lifted by Jupiter in your sign. So to summarize, Aries, give a bit with that support of Jupiter, set your boundaries, but also try to find areas where maybe you can let go of the things that aren't really so important, and that will give you much more energy and freedom to explore the possibilities in all sorts of friendships, relationships and alliances. Now Taurus, for you, the new moon is obviously in the sign of Libra, so the equilibrium that Libra likes is important to you, and that for you could be something you become much more conscious of around your work. But also getting a better balance in terms of your commitments and obligations. Or because you quite possibly do have a real appreciation for good food and good wine, is there a way that you can just moderate some of your intake to just help you to not be quite so sluggish, a bit more agile if you wanted to lose a little bit of weight, because the 6th house is essentially about virtue. Now, because your ruling planet Venus is very close to Mercury, but for you in a very bubbly part of your situation, the 5th house, that's about self-expression. You could get together with some colleagues or people you know through your work, or just in your everyday world, and actually have some moments of sociability over the next few weeks. But I think Mars being in your 2nd house is really giving you the drive to improve your resources. And if you are in a job or a role which you feel underappreciated in, or you're not rewarded fairly for, this could see you looking at the jobs vacant, even if it is online. Now, Gemini, this new moon can be absolutely brilliant for you, because the 5th and 11th house axes of your situation are really emphasized in a very desirable way. This may mean lots of invitations are set to come into you over the next few weeks, and you may actually have to manage your time quite carefully in order to deal with this. And of course, Mars is encouraging you to take a firmer grip on your life direction in terms of your personal expression and your individual hopes. So, the charisma that comes from this new moon opportunity is undoubted. What's not to like? Well, it may just be that because your ruler Mercury is being compromised, not just by the retrograde, which means there could be a few changes of plan, cross wires, all the usual stuff that you know. But remember, Mercury retrograde can be a chance to reset, recalibrate and go again. But it's because of Neptune. Neptune opposite your ruler can be a really, really tricky influence. And maybe when it comes to a work situation, you might not be quite as clear-minded as is usually the case. One of the things I love about Gemini people is your agility. You can pivot to opportunities and demonstrate different parts of your nature, just quite naturally. But I think there could be a little bit of self-doubt just when there's an opportunity to seize the moment. And it's that darn Neptune that could be the cause of this in its retrograde of its own. So just be aware that when it comes to talking to anyone in a position of influence or about a job situation, your personal and emotional perspective could influence your thinking much more than usual. But if you can keep it light and bright, this is a fabulous new moon for you and can really see you sparkle over the next month. Now, Cancer, you're someone with a reputation for an appreciation of your home. If you tune into me a lot, you'll know that I often push back against that. I think what Cancerians have got a real appreciation of is your immediate environment. So it doesn't matter if that's at work or at home. You need to feel comfortable in that environment. And this new moon, because it's in an opposition with Jupiter, suggests that if you're not content with where you're living, the energy of Venus and Mercury in a very quick-witted part of your scope could see you doing a lot of thinking, a lot of researching, a lot of talking to people in order to try to make a shift about where you live. Now, that could be that you actually want to adapt your current abode. But for some Cancer people, I think the next month does potentially provide an opportunity to move on or to make some significant changes to where you are now. If you've been where you are for a long time and there are any kind of painful memories attached to that residency, or your history has not had it easy, Mars is calling out to that at the moment, particularly in its T-square with Mars, Neptune and Mercury. But it is also forging a great link with Saturn in your 8th house of longer term finance. Don't forget that you are probably I say, one of the most resourceful of all the zodiac signs. So when you have to dig deep to find the strength, even when things are really worrisome in terms of, you know, any strand in your situation, you often find the resources. And I think you can do that now. But I think there can be some really delightful conversations. But if you are talking about a travel plan, and it's highly likely that you could go in somewhere that really is very tranquil, perhaps a retreat, or somewhere that is very meditative, could really call out to you, especially with Neptune connecting you to your imagination in a very vivid way. But I think the details, the mechanics of actually going there need to be planned with great care, because Neptune can distort, and obviously Mercury retrograde can cause a bit of mischief too, which brings us to Leo. Now, your natural charisma in terms of your inherent personality is the stuff of astral law, but how we express ourselves is very important too. I think the pace of life is picking up for you now. You're going to be doing a lot of thinking about your ideas, and because Jupiter, the planet which influences the second decan of your zodiac sign, so if you're born in the second 10 degrees of the sign of Leo, you have a natural appreciation for Jupiter, and at the moment that's in the 9th house of your situation, very much in keeping with its Sagittarius vibe. So breaking out and doing something more spontaneous, shaking up your world, bringing a greater sense of spontaneity to it, can really delight you. Mars is also in your sector of friendship and the collective. However, because Mercury and Venus are in your 2nd house, ordinarily, if we didn't have Neptune opposing them, and Mercury also wasn't retrograde, this could be a time, despite the headwinds we're all confronted with, when you could really do well financially, but particularly because of your bright ideas and your ability to interact with people so skillfully and successfully. So a bubbly month is in store for you, but I think you are going to be talking a lot about money. And it's very, very important that when it comes to shared resources or sources of finance, that you don't jump to any quick conclusions, because Jupiter could give you a false sense of security or make you a little bit over optimistic or overconfident, when really it's more important to have a discussion and just think very carefully about the next step you want to take. Which brings us to Virgo. Now for you, the new moon's in your sector of everyday resources, but your ruler Mercury and Venus are together in your sign. If you have got even 1 ounce of creative talent, and you're often a brilliant crafter, this can be a time when maybe a hobby that you've had until now could actually come into the picture in terms of aiding your income. And also with Jupiter in your 8th house, shared resources or money linked to someone you're involved with, or a pension payout or a legacy or some kind of inheritance can also come to you over the next month. Or it may be that with Mars high in the sky, in a very authoritative and confident part of your situation, that this can be a time when you can raise your profile with even more confidence. It's just that somebody close to you may be a bit of a wet blanket. So something that you're really excited about, that you feel's got real potential, they could be precisely the person that's not actually getting it, and that could be very frustrating. And part of the problem is you may feel, however much you try to explain it using the diplomacy of Libra, it seems to not be heard by the other person, or they just seem to get bits of it or get in a bit of a tizzy about exactly what you're meaning. And that's all about Neptune. You've had lots of this since 2012, where people haven't always found it easy to understand where you're coming from. But on the whole, I think there are real opportunities to improve your lot over the next month. Now, Libra, for you, this is the best new moon of the whole year, of course. You've recently, on the 23rd, had the third cardinal quadrant, and of course we've had the sun arrive in your sign with the autumnal equinox. So you're already feeling the force, and this energy just tops it up even more. From week commencing the 26th, on the Thursday, just as we're going through the turn of the months, Venus, your ruler, arrives in your sign. All of these things are great news stories for you. So it's about balancing your cardinal energy, which is very much about being a leader and being very dynamic, with your natural diplomacy, but not losing your identity by being too much of a people pleaser. So the new moon's asking you to focus on what's important to you. But with Mercury and your ruler Venus in the 12th house, some of those vague fears could be floating around. And of course, Neptune in the 6th house means that you're constantly aware of your obligations to others. But with Pluto finally giving you something back by being in this disassociate trine with the Sun and Venus, you can see the transition you're going through between this year since 2008 period of really trying to work out what really mattered around your home, emotional and family life. You're on the cusp of really embracing a much more outgoing, dynamic and fun future, and it's all coming for you in the next year, and you get a bit of a glimpse of it on this particular event. So don't give your time away to unworthy causes. You know, if you need to push back, if someone is a bit too demanding, do so. And with Mars in that 9th house, if you need to be more spontaneous about getting away from it all, then do so. Scorpio, for you, this new moon is in your 12th house. One of the trickiest of all the new moons, because this is about the part of our personalities we find hard to see. The subconscious, the hidden side, maybe the shadow side, some people would call it. Or maybe it's our fears, or maybe it's to do with trust and reliability and sincerity. But with Venus and Mercury together in your 11th house, this is quite bubbly, but it is opposite Neptune in your sector of romance. So I think, you know, the inference is clear. There may be opportunities to play and to even be in a very romantic space, but what you really need, above all else, is a person whose intentions are exactly matching yours, and the more sincere they are, the better. But with Mars, your traditional ruler, in such a powerful and sensual part of your horoscope, if there is someone that you just cannot resist, Mars's broad right angle with Venus, and it could be someone in your circle, may see you getting much more intimate with them before too long. Which brings us to Sagittarius. So this event is in your 11th house of fun, the collective networking, sociability, and also your future long-term hopes. And because Jupiter, your ruler, is in on the act on your 5th house cusp, that's very much about your personal expression, some fun time can await you over the next few weeks. Neptune, yeah, it's there as ever, it seems. It is going to be moving out of your 4th house in 2024, and I think that's going to be something you really do appreciate. But for now, it is a bit of a swirling mist, and it is opposite the position of Mercury and Venus in your 10th house of work and bigger and wider responsibilities. So there may be some home issues that are still, you know, interrupting some of your goals and aims, but Mars is in your 7th house, which obviously is a very Libran energy. If you need to be a bit more assertive, Mars is giving you the tools to be so. So Capricorn, your sector of success is highlighted by this new moon, but also if your focus is very much on a property matter, good news could follow over the next few weeks. The connection of Venus and Mercury is actually in your sector of adventure. Neptune being in the mix as well suggests that you could find yourself booking a holiday, even if it's not till next year, to somewhere that has some kind of inspiring element to it. But Mars is in your sector of hard work and application. So if your focus is very much more on moving forwards, advancing your aims, and also increasing your earnings or gaining greater recognition for your talents, the next month can be critical to do that. I just think in a very pragmatic way, it is possible that there can be quite a lot of conversations, and maybe your work could be linked to travel in some kind of way. If it is, it will be important to make sure that everything is very clear. Neptune can distort, of course, but Pluto in your sign, although late now in Capricorn, is linking very helpfully to the Sun and the Moon. So, if you really want to go for it when it comes to a big ambition, the next month gives you a wonderful opportunity to be very decisive. Now, Aquarius with Saturn and Uranus, your two co-rulers, in that crunching right angle, it may still feel that everything is very much about home, emotion, family, the base of your existence. But this new moon's asking you to put all that to one side and have a complete interlude. Go off and do things that really give you a sense of release. And if you can be very, very playful with Mars in your 5th house, do it. I think there could be some good news about a contractual matter over the next few weeks. Of course, because Venus and Mercury, exalted in your sign, Mercury in retrograde, are being conflicted by Neptune, there could be some blurry stuff around your financial situation, particularly around shared finances. All of us can do is print off the statements, tick everything off, be absolutely meticulous. Remember, Mercury can help us to reset when it's in retrograde. So, if you've been with, say, a provider of a mortgage or a banking service for a long time, have they started to take you for granted? It seems to me that every single deal that comes up, whether it's for insurance or whatever, it's almost like every time it's a competitive bid for each individual to go into some kind of combat with the provider, because the last thing that they're focused on is existing users. They're wanting to win new custom. So I think with Mercury in your 8th house, you may be rethinking some of those relationships, whether it is with a utility provider, for example. Entirely understandable if you wanted to find greater value there, but I think it could lay around insurance products or mortgage products as much as anything else. And whilst Neptune can, say, heighten your idealism, I think Venus and Mercury together can be a really smart mix. But the appetite for it comes from the fact that the new moon's in the part of your situation to do with knowledge. And that knowledge could be, getting off the beaten track and encountering a new culture for a holiday, or learning a foreign language, or it could be something more to do with educating yourself into the realities of your situation so you can marshal it in a more successful way. And Jupiter's there in the mix to support you as much as it can. Which brings us to Pisces. Last but never least, you are the 12th zodiac sign, so therefore you're the accumulation of all the other zodiac signs. So you have innate wisdom. So thank you for sticking with me to this part of the forecast. So Jupiter is your ruler, your traditional ruler. Neptune is your other co-regent, and they're both in the mix. So Jupiter's on the descendant of the new moon. This could be good for finance over the next couple of weeks. I know that seems a very odd thing to say, but it's true. But in a relationship matter, it could be that however much you try to share how you feel, someone finds it difficult to really understand where you're coming from. Or are you being a bit prickly and defensive? Entirely possible with Mars in your 4th house, T-square in Neptune, also Venus and Mars. Or is there someone that's going to be introduced to you that could come through a family situation or a local situation, and actually there's a big spark of attraction, but there may be something else about this person that you find is a bit of a turn off? But certainly possible. But essentially, the new moon's in the part of your situation to do with transitions and transformations. The 8th house is very deep, it's very scorpionic. If there are parts of your existence that have served their purpose and you let them go, you're clearing the way for new energy and new possibilities to come in. if you're holding on to some of those things because they're familiar, the patterns mean that at some level you're safe, but you're not venturing out because it just feels easier to have a low risk approach to life, you could be significantly missing out and transforming your life in a really powerful way. So the next 4 weeks for you, think about the concept of transitions, but particularly in deep relationships. And with Venus set to come into this sector towards the end of September, someone very interesting can enter your celestial orbit over the next 4 weeks.